Hi, this is Roger. In our wonderful hobby of growing orchids, which I'm sure, like me, everybody gets loads of pleasure out of, when it becomes a chore or when it becomes hard work, it's time to change. It's time to do something differently. Now that might be half the number of orchids you've got. It might be get somebody to help you. There'll always be a solution to a problem, or there should always be. And this is just a general sort of chat about the hobby and the pleasure it can give us. We think of there are unknowns. I mean, I know my plants have done better this year than they did the year before. I don't know that they will do any better next year, so that's an unknown. They could do worse. They might do exactly the same. Maybe they are now growing as good as I can do, and there won't be any improvements, just hopefully bigger and stronger plants, but nothing much will change, so that's an unknown. A known fact, I had a wonderful day at our Orchid Society garden party, and I was very privileged at the end. My host, whose place it was, decided that having shown a little bit of interest in the red stuff that goes in the glass, and there's a known, I do enjoy that, we got shown his wine cellar. Now, cellar would be a loose description because it's not underground. In fact, it used to be an old pig shed. I'm sure it was thoroughly cleaned before he put his wine in there. But quick calculation probably said around 3,000 bottles of wine. The oldest one in that cellar was made in 1922. There were a vast array of wines from around the world that were produced around 1940, 1950, which means some of those were produced during the war. However, that's the best array of wines I have ever seen in my life anywhere. And at the end of the tour, which on yesterday's outdoor temperatures and humidity levels was a place I could have stayed because it was air conditionally controlled and humidity levels controlled, and it was very pleasant and cool in there. I could have stayed a lot longer. Trouble is, I don't think he wanted to leave me on my own in that place. Can't think why. Anyway, he presented me with a bottle of wine at the end. He said, keep this for a special occasion. And I looked at what it was, bearing in mind it was bottled in 1947. It's got to be worth quite a bit of money. And I replied, I'm not sure I ever have an occasion special enough to open this, but I'll find one. And I hope I enjoy that when the cork comes out. It should be wonderful. Anyway, I digress. On to knowns and unknowns. When some of my blooms come out, I know whether I like them or not. What I don't know is whether others will like them. Yeah, we do our videos and we present what we've got, and people can choose to like or dislike, whatever. Hopefully if you're going to dislike something you say why, and if you like something you say why. That way we learn a bit. Right, on to facts and things. With the recent sagas, I've got a new feed for my orchids. I'm confident, although I can't say it's a fact, that any nitrogen-based chemical product that you add to water and it dissolves increases the TDS level by relative amounts, depending on how much and what type of nitrogen, possibly. I'm not a scientist. Now, what I do know is that when measuring the TDS of the water I'm now using, which is a mix of activated carbon filtered water and some RO water, to get a basic TDS level that I'm happy with, that I'm confident can do no harm. Not a fact, but I'm confident, so an assumption. And then I add my new fertiliser in and check the TDS level, and basically it went up from about 145 to about 155. So I can pretty confidently say that that stuff's got nothing in it, but what it has got in it can do no harm. So all I know now is my babies are getting a drink when they need it. They're not going to dehydrate. They're on rations. In our equivalent, it's probably the equivalent of bread and water. And they haven't even done anything wrong. But until I can find a more suitable solution, they're on rations. A lot of the growing's been done this year, and there's a couple of months of good growing season left that I might not be able to take full advantage of. My plants won't deteriorate, they're not going to die, they're just not going to get the boost that I was hoping to do this year. There'll be other years. Well, I hope there will. Okay, so, you know, I'm happy with the way I'm going to run things now. I'm not going to do any harm. I'm going to stop the process of burning all my roots and losing my root tips on some of the plants. And we'll continue like that for a while. We'll see how it goes. But, you know, always be aware that unless you profess to know everything, then you've always got some unknowns. You've always got some things that you will have to assume will happen. There's an assumption there. Kiki's coming on nicely. So that is actually ready to come off. And when I take it off, it'll be detached from the mother plant. It has its own root support system that needs about another week of acclimatization, which I've neglected recently due to other things going on, just to make sure those roots are happy with being wet every day and drying out, being wet, drying out. And that'll get potted up, possibly in the same pot as the mother plant, or as a new plant, possibly to give away or to sell. So, we live in a world of unknowns and some knowns. In the orchid world, there's a lot of unknowns. We just have to do our best. And, you know, a lot of us do. You know, if you look at the orchid tubers, there's some smashing plants out there. There's no reason to ever get despondent or worried that you're killing your orchids. We all lose an orchid now and again. Nobody's that good. Most of the time you lose an orchid because it was on its way out in the first place. You've tried to rescue it and failed. Don't get despondent. We all lose one now and again. There are plenty more available. That's the way to look at it. Okay, you spend a few pennies. If you haven't got the pennies, you can't spend them. If you've got them and this is your hobby and you enjoy it, spend some pennies. Get a new plant. Have a nice day. Okay? So just a few thoughts on what's going on. I've got a big New Forest show coming up, so that's a 3-day event and I've volunteered to help out on our stand for all 3 days. A show I've never been able to go to before because it was weekdays and I was always at work and the traffic's horrendous. But because I will now have a privileged pass, I can get in and park my car in a nice sensible place for free. That's what you get for volunteering, see? You get a freebie. So, you know, I'll try and do some videos of what's going on. It's not an orchid show, it's a country fair. There's all sorts of things going on, from people charging around on horses and jumping over stuff to people flying, you know, falconry, birds of prey, dogs going everywhere and doggy tricks, jumping over things and crawling through stuff. There's lots of things to go on. And the fact that I'm there on all 3 days and with others helping out, I'll get a chance to have a good look round and I'll see if I can do some filming. But in the orchid front, I think there's only 1 or 2 orchid related things that will be there, one of which is us. This one's going to go to the show because they are crying out for anything. So that's got 2 spikes on. It's a very unusual flower. It's also fragrant. So for people who don't know much about orchids, oh, that's unusual. Look at the shape of that flower. That's marvellous. So, you know, it'll attract attention. This one will go. You know, this is hits the zoom button by mistake. Ooh, struth. More coffee. This one will go simply because it's a nice bright colour and it's got a nice lot of blooms on it. Yeah, it's a long way from the plant, but we'll work with that. This may well go if it hangs on long enough. You know what cattleyas are like. They don't tend to last too long. This may go, I'm not sure yet, because in what this plant is supposed to look like, it's a beautiful plant, the leaves are gorgeous and they're in good condition. Oh, it's grown a new one. Yay! Oh, I'm glad I looked at that. But it's got 3 flower spikes that have only got 1 bloom on each and they all face in different directions. It doesn't lend itself to being shown very well. So it's not in a best blooming condition at the moment, and that's a fact, because I know what it should look like. That's going to go simply because it's a nice bright colour and it shows a style of orchid that in the wild would be marvellous to see. I've yet to do that. But, you know, it's sort of growing in a natural way. It's not growing in anything. For people who don't know much about orchids, it's unusual, it's interesting. Well, hopefully it is. So that will go. I might risk that one. That flower hasn't been open that long. They last 3 or 4 weeks, something like that, so it might be getting towards the end. But again, it's an unusual flower. You know, it's a strange shape to people who don't see orchids very often, apart from the Phalaenopsis when they do their shopping, which is what most people know. This one will probably go, simply because it is highly fragrant. And if we can get that near the front of the stand and put a little label sticking up saying I'm fragrant, then I'll have to put up with hundreds of noses getting poked into my flower spike. But we're trying to rustle up members, we're trying to rustle up some interest in this marvellous subject of orchids, which is vast, you know. And talking to people at the garden party, one thing I have learnt is there's an awful lot of people who hardly feed their orchids at all. And they're winning, you know, elements of shows, sometimes at national level. Our Masdevallia grower, he's a joint member in 2 societies, chairman of one and a member of ours, and he's a Masdevallia specialist. That's mainly what he grows. He's got a smattering of other types of orchids, but that's his thing. He loves Masdes, and he has a vast collection. And I asked him about feeding, and he said, "No, I don't do that very often. I think I've fed mine about 3 times this year so far." And he's winning shows with those plants. So I'm going to revert back to old ways, where orchids can survive on very little. Now, unfortunately, that's all they're going to get at the moment, because I've got no choices. But it sounds like, you know, one person's or some people's ideas of pushing your orchids hard in the growing season is still a good idea, but not absolutely essential. Depends what you're after. Some people are just after life. They just want their plants to live, and they'll be happy with that. Some people want to go out and win a section of a national show. Now, their plants have got to be damn near perfect. You know, especially if the RHS are involved with judging, or, you know, actually perfect, if you want that sort of award. And that's their goal, that's what they're trying to achieve. Well, they're going to look after their orchids different to how I do mine, and probably how you do yours. So, just backtrack a little from your end goal. What's your end goal? To enjoy your orchids. To do that, they must be doing reasonably well, or they become a hassle. So, the amount of knowledge you need is enough knowledge to look after the types of orchids you've got. That'll do. It's a hobby. You don't need to know the whole universe inside out to look after some orchids. And yes, some are difficult and some are fussy. Well, if you don't want that sort of orchid, don't get that sort of orchid. Stick with the stuff you know and the stuff that works, and enjoy. That's what the hobby's all about. Okay, so just a quick ramble about various things I'm going to change, things I'm going to leave the same, and some hopes and dreams for next year. I can't have many more orchids, but I can change the ones I've got. So I'm still rationalising. Some orchids are not doing as well as I'd like. Well, somebody else can probably look after those better and make them do better than I can. So some of those might go, and they'll get replaced with types of orchids that in my environment are doing really well. So a few more of those will bring pleasure, not hassles. So go steady where your boundaries are and where you push yourself. It's nice to push on a little bit and try something new, but don't make your hobby a hassle. Don't make it work. It's supposed to be pleasure. And talking of pleasure, this one's giving me quite a lot at the moment. My only new plant for some time, actually. And I didn't buy any yesterday on the sales table. There was nothing there I fancied. There was quite a bit there that I've already got. That's the downside of a society. There's only so many members. There's only so many members that bring plants in for sale, and a lot of the same thing comes in over and over again. And a little bonus this morning. Can I get at it? Can I even find it? This is my Hercoglossum that this year was stunning. Ah, there it is. Gotcha. Something else I found on this plant this morning was a few mealybugs. They are now ex-mealybugs. This is not its flowering season, Now that's a little treat. I've got a little flower spike. It's incredibly late for this plant, but it's just going to push a few more little flowers out. And this is my favourite bloom. In all of my orchids, this is my favourite. And I thought it had finished for the year. And it's going to treat me to just a few. What's there? 4 buds on that. Can't see any other spikes anywhere. But it's just having a last little flurry for the year. So in whatever, 3-4 weeks' time, there'll be a little bit of pleasure from that orchid again. It's growing incredibly well, but I thought it had finished flowering. So there we go. Enjoy your hobby. It's important. It's important not to get bogged down and get, worried about stuff. Enjoyment is what it's all about. So let's have some fun. Let's have some enjoyment. And if you've got a chair like I have, sit back, relax, enjoy your blooms, and pat yourself on the back if you've got them, because not everybody, gets their plants to reflower. A lot of that will be the choice of plant geared up to the environment you've got. Check your environment, see what you've got, see what will grow well in it, and get those plants. That way you enjoy your orchid life. Okay, thanks for dropping by. Bye for now.